Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome in and on Texas football Tuesday night live stream and conversation. Texas football into the bye week, sitting at 7-1 and 4 to go in the regular season. Welcome in. I'm Aaron Hogan. Jerry Hamilton in for Rod Babers tonight, who's enjoying a Tuesday off. CJ Vogel there. We're going to talk about the travels of one Jerry Hamilton, where you've been, what you've been watching as far as recruiting goes. CJ Vogel will have some updates. We'll talk about the improvement for the Longhorns into the bye week. Ahead of that Florida game and the Final Three. Also, guys, certainly get into something you told us about, Jerry, an ESPN show tonight that kind of paired up the top 12 teams and had the Longhorns and Aggies as a 7-10 matchup in the first round. Where would the game be played?
In Austin.
Okay.
So each team would get a home game this year. Could you imagine that? I mean, I can't even imagine if A&M and Texas played in a playoff game in Austin.
Here's the picture you took. That would be crazy.
And that would be 3 weeks after Texas plays at A&M.
Yeah, because the game's November 30th. That would be the weekend of December 20th and 21st in Austin. And, that would obviously, I think, mean Georgia wins the SEC championship, and then Texas gets the 6, A&M loses, or however it plays out in the SEC championship game. But they both get in. And obviously A&M with that huge win last Saturday night over LSU, they're in a good track right now with a sneaky tough game this week at South Carolina. We know Texas has 4 games to go, but certainly could happen the way it's trending, guys.
Yeah, South Carolina is, it was interesting. Todd Gurley at SEC Media Days, he was being interviewed, and somebody asked him, hey, what's the the toughest place to play in the SEC? He said South Carolina at night. All right, well, here you go. Shane Beamer is 6-1 in night games at South Carolina, and here comes A&M playing as extremely well. So the South Carolina edges are both next level dudes. They have 28 sacks as a team this year for South Carolina. So that's gonna be a heck of a game and a tough test for A&M. A&M's got 2 tough road tests left at South Carolina, and even Auburn. People laugh at Auburn. Auburn's gonna knock off somebody this year. Who's it gonna be? And A&M's there the week before Texas. So we got elimination games every week. It feels like, CJ, a lot going on. Ohio State at Penn State. Drew Allar may not play, but it's elimination games. They're starting right about now in college football. Like Ole Miss is playing at Arkansas. They're essentially be eliminated from the playoff contention this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was interesting looking at that line when it released and seeing, A&M was only favored by 2, and you're thinking, well, they just came off of a big time blowout victory over LSU. Why is it so tight? Well, playing on the road under the lights, at South Carolina, not an easy thing to do. So it'll be another test, and A&M hasn't had a lot of those on their schedule, but this is going to be a fun one. And like you said, they've been rolling, man. That team is clicking right now, regardless of quarterback. They're finding ways to put up points and stop opposing offenses. So that'll be fun. Elimination season's here. I'm all for it.
Yep. Survive and advance. And I saw that line come out. It's not the same thing, CJ, but Longhorn fans will learn. I think SEC fans know 1 week is not the next in this conference. 1 week is 1 week, and you rip and start over with a new one. And yes, South Carolina will be tough. I mean, they might be, if you power rank, which we did on the radio show this morning, the top 16 in the SEC by tiers. So South Carolina with that, with their record would be down there 10, 11, 12. But still, they're only 2 points an underdog to A&M at home because it is that night environment. Shane Beamer's team is scared some people and, smashed Oklahoma, played LSU really close. So that should be a fun game. But, boy, to his point about A&M, and we'll get into the Longhorns here, of course, coming up. But, Jerry and CJ, I know we all left SEC Media Days where we covered it in Dallas. Very impressed with Mike Elko and just what a difference he was from Jimbo Fisher. And he's just a football coach, and he's all business. And that defense can really play. That group up front, it's starting to look like the kid Regis next to Shamar Turner. It kind of looks like Murphy and Sweat from last year, guys. You just can't get them off the line of scrimmage. You can't move them. You can't run the ball between the tackles, and they're really good on that line of scrimmage. And Torian York's a heck of a linebacker.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I think they're A&M against Missouri and LSU. If you can block them up front, you're going to have guys wide open. But nobody's consistently blocked them up front. And LSU's offensive line is really good. And Nussmeier can play under duress a little bit. But if you can block their front four, they don't have the linebackers. Torian York's a good player, but they don't have Jalen Walker and Raylan Wilson. And keep naming those linebackers like Georgia does. Georgia's got the 7. A&M's got the 4.5. And, that's what'll be interesting. If you can control their front, if you have a pocket passing quarterback, you're going to have guys open because I think their secondary is okay, but they're not great. That's no different than Georgia. If you can actually protect against Georgia's 7, their secondary has been beat this year. But now when games get real with Kirby Smart, it's harder to protect against those guys, especially that now they're getting healthier, which leads us to Georgia and Florida Saturday. I think one of the big things coming out of Saturday when you're watching that Georgia-Florida game is Florida's got to keep DJ Lagway healthy because Graham Mertz is out for the year. And Georgia's going to be trying to smoke that dude now in this game. Kirby loves to beat down Florida if he can. Florida's got to be a little careful with DJ Lagway because their schedule in November is brutal, even though FSU's terrible. Their schedule's really tough, and Graham Mertz is already out for the year. So they have to proceed with a little bit of caution with Derek Lagway to get him to Austin and beyond because you don't want – I don't care how big he is. You don't want him running into contact with those Georgia guys a number of times in that game Saturday.
It's a heck of a point.
It is. Yeah, I mean, that Georgia team, we saw it with Texas. I mean, that's part of the reason I think Sark took Quinn out was like, man, we're getting my guy killed out here. Yep. Get somebody in there that can move a little bit until we get this figured out, how to protect our players and our quarterback. But that's a big one. Yeah, the cocktail party is this weekend, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, A&M. Obviously, the biggest game nationally is Penn State and Ohio State. Which really, as we went through this morning, it's interesting when you look at the tiers of the Power 4 conferences. The top 4 in the SEC would be A&M right now at the top because they're undefeated in the conference, right, at 5-0. Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee are your top 4, but they play each other. Texas plays Texas A&M. Georgia plays Tennessee in a couple of weeks in Athens. So those things will shake out and we'll play. In the Big Ten, you've got Oregon undefeated, Indiana undefeated, and then Penn State and Ohio State essentially play for the 3 spot, right, with this weekend. And it's like a 1-point line. I mean, Ohio State hadn't been able to run the ball of late at all. With their offensive line, they couldn't push Nebraska. Indiana pushed Nebraska up and down the field, which was surprising. And then Ohio State could not. And then there's, then Indiana plays Ohio State in 3 weeks. Right. Before they play Michigan. That whole Big Ten thing is going to sort itself out, and it might be Indiana, Oregon when it's all said and done.
Well, the crazy thing is, you want to talk about survive and advance. Ryan Day's literally in survive and advance right now. If he loses to Penn State, it's going to be for sale signs in his yard. If he loses to Indiana, they're going to bring the U-Haul in.
Maybe fire trucks.
I don't want to say it's likely, Jerry, but I mean, one team's playing tremendous football with an injured quarterback and without. The other one's Ohio State right now that's kind of struggling on both sides, right? I mean, it's not living up to the billing for Ohio State as the quote-unquote most talented roster in college football coming into the year. That's not been close to what we've seen as a product on the field this year.
Yeah.
Well, the great part for college football fans and for the Big Ten, you don't have to speculate. They're going to play each other. Indiana will get their shot at Ohio State. And the stat that stands out for the Buckeyes, they don't really rush the passer very well, even though they have a really good front. Their pass rush is not great. And as I mentioned, if you take in their last 2 games, if you take away a 50-yard run from Torian Henderson, they're rushing for like 2.6 yards a carry. Outside of that 150-yard run, they're getting no push. And Penn State, they can really get after you. They got a great pass rush. I know James Franklin never beats Ohio State, but this feels like a ripe spot for them. Will Howard is a kid from the state of Pennsylvania who kind of feels slighted that he was never recruited by Penn State. He camped at Penn State. That's going to be a heck of a fun game. But I just love that in the Big 12 or in the SEC and the Big 10, they're going to play themselves out. The teams that are at the top 4 are going to play each other. Here in the next 4 weeks of the season. That's great because there will leave no doubt. Could Indiana play with Ohio State? Well, they're going to get to play them and kind of decide who's going to go to the Big Ten championship game. The one team that is kind of, I don't want to say on cruise control, but has an easy path to the championship game is Oregon because they really don't have to play a heavy hitter here in the month of November. If they just handle their business, they're going to be playing in the Big Ten title game. The other 3 below them will sort themselves out, and that will be a lot of fun when we get to championship Saturday.
Hey, look, by the way, it's hard to blame James Franklin for not offering Howard because, I mean, Chad Powers was at the same camp, right?
Yeah, he can sling it a little bit, can he?
If you're throwing side by side that Chad Powers guy that showed up at Penn State camp, nobody else is getting an offer. That I'll tell you.
That was Eli Manning, right? Playing the joke
Yeah,
in the
it
videos,
was.
YouTube. That was great.
That was
great.
hilarious.
Well, just to finish that off, and then we'll get into some Longhorns. The ACC, you're looking at Miami's got a pretty clean path to the ACC championship game. Now, Pitt plays SMU this week. You wouldn't have thought at the start of the year that was a huge game. That's a huge game in North Dallas.
And Kevin Jennings is a maybe for SMU in that game.
Yeah.
Starting quarterback, who's their lifeline, is a maybe.
And so they play at SMU this weekend. And then, so Pittsburgh undefeated, one of those 8 undefeated teams, playing at SMU. SMU's one loss this year, even though they weren't ultra impressive last week at Duke. They survived the game 28-27 against Malik Murphy and company. So that's a huge game for Pitt and SMU. And then Clemson still has to play Louisville, Virginia Tech, and then Pittsburgh. But none of them play Miami. So Miami's going to kind of cruise right into the ACC title game with Cam Ward. Big 12, it's BYU waiting on what happens with K-State via Iowa State, right? If you just look at that, let's play it out. There could be a game the same day Texas plays Texas A&M. Iowa State could host K-State, where one is undefeated and one is 10-1, playing in the champion, or 11-1, playing in the championship game to go play BYU, whose last 4 games are very, very winnable against the mid to the bottom teams of the Big 12.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how all this plays out. The first college football playoff rankings release is a week from today. It's going to be right about this time, I think, during this show, maybe an hour before. But the Big 12 is interesting. We talked about it a little bit on Coffee and Football this morning, but if the Big 12 got 2 teams in, and that would probably require either 11-1 Kansas State beating an undefeated BYU, right? Or Iowa State and BYU both being undefeated, and one's 12, then one's 13-0, and the other's 12-1. But if the Big 12 got 2 teams into the college football playoff, somebody from the Big 10 or SEC, somebody's losing a spot at that point. I do think 2 ACC teams will probably get in unless Clemson gets upset, because I think Clemson will beat Miami in an ACC championship game. But if they're both 12-1, they're both going to get in. And then Notre Dame, even though they play ACC, I think it's just going to be considered independent if they went out, and they will get in, and 2 ACC teams will get in along with them. But if 2 Big 12s get in, that means somebody from the Big 10 or SEC is not getting in. So then that gets down to a 10-2 SEC or 10-2 Big 10. Somebody's going to get left out in that scenario if the Big 12 gets 2 in. It's going to be interesting to see. People are going to lose, and it'll probably work itself out. But that's why college football is in the best place it's ever been. The conversations we're having now about Pittsburgh being undefeated, Indiana it should be in a playoff at this point unless they fall apart. It's a blast. It's so much fun. I love it.
I was going to say the expanded conferences allow for teams to play. You don't have to play everybody. So there's conversations for 2 to 3, 4 teams being undefeated this late in the year where, one plays another, 2 plays 3 or whatnot. And, that makes for these big time games to mean so much more versus what we've talked about, where it's maybe in Oregon has a path of no resistance. And, these big time games, it almost extends that playoff from, 12 teams to week 12, 11, 10, because everything's basically a must win, and teams have to pull out the stops to get into the college football playoff ahead of time in the regular season. If you clinch a spot in the conference championship game, that cements your spot, essentially. And if you win that game, then now you have a bye and you can move forward into the second round. So playing what is already essentially playoff football right now is awesome. It's tremendous for the sport in my eyes.
Yeah, agreed. It's a lot of fun. Some of it's real clear, and then it'll get muddier, I'm sure, as we go. But it does feel like it's going to work itself out. But I agree with you, Jerry, especially if that Big 12 scenario plays out. Notre Dame plays their way in. Cincinnati keeps winning. That's going to knock out a big dog from one of the big conferences. You got to guarantee it. That's why the Longhorns need to handle their business, guys. Let's start with this about the Longhorns. We'll get into more of where the recruiting stories are, what the Longhorns coaches' plan is for this recruiting weekend during the bye. They're going to fan out again and hit as many high schools as they can. But when we heard Sark talking about improvement, I would say this big picture before we get into the specifics. It is interesting that through 8 games, we're not talking about the defense needs fixed, right? The defense is number 1 in the country. Going into the year, the idea was, well, if the defense can join the offense at the top, this is going to be a really good team. The defense has not disappointed. They've played tremendous. Putting some bad spots in both the Georgia and the Vanderbilt game. So they gave up some points like they hadn't been given up. But the question marks on the offensive side of the ball trying to improve for the final 4 games. Offensive line, offense and quarterback, running game. How do you guys both rank those? What are the most important things that need to get fixed here before they play Florida on the 9th?
It's all the offensive line, everything about it. It's pass protection, it's running lanes. And there have been running lanes. Maybe the running backs need to find vision a little bit earlier, find some patience in that game. But when you look at the holdings, when you look at the pressures off the edges, when you look at the miscommunication and the slidings that don't occur simultaneously, and that has to be fixed. This is a veteran group. This is one that shouldn't be having miscommunications and guys not picked up ahead of time, right? You can't be misdiagnosing fronts and, again, not sliding to where you need to be. And Texas has fallen victim to that. You could add the tight ends in there, 2 holding calls this past 2 weeks. You could add the running backs in there. 2 holding.
I think it's a whole. I think
it's the entirety of the pass protection. And, to even go further, I think that there's been more boom or bust in the run game. I look at the final 10 true rush attempts in that game on Saturday against Vanderbilt. Texas did not run the football very well. They had that 3rd and 7 almost kind of draw play that caught Vanderbilt off guard on 3rd and 8, went for 23. Texas in their last 10 attempts, 34 rushing yards. That's 3.4 with the 23-yard rush. If you take that out, they average 1.2 yards per rush against Vanderbilt. That's not where you want to be when Sarkisian's whole thing is pass early to open the run late, play that complementary offensive style of football. That's been absent for Texas.
Hey, Jerry, is it an observation I'm making? Are they trying to shift to more of a zone blocking scheme for Trey Wisner's talents, and maybe they're struggling with that a little bit, that they're kind of preparing all off season for CJ Baxter and the pulling power plays more because that's his style, and Wisner, if he's going to be your RB1, you have to shift what you're doing somewhat on the fly to accentuate what he does well.
Yeah, I think they're more outside zone, more wide zone for sure with these backs, and I think that's created some of the holds, honestly, because look, I mean, you're climbing and you're working around guys in that scenario instead of working through guys. So I think that's been part of the holds. For Texas. And I do think that running game, that plan has changed. And we talked about it when the Baxter injury happened. And I think some people it'll just be status quo. No, I mean, these are different types of backs, man. I mean, there's a reason Sark likes to recruit different types of backs, but these guys all have different strengths. And CJ Baxter was your inside zone guy. You could run counters, everything with him, but you weren't going to run a ton of wide zone with him, right? You weren't going to run a ton of outside zone with him as much. So it definitely changed the Texas run game in their plan. And it's really affected their pass protection. But in the run game, that outside, that wide zone, I do think that has created a few more holds on the offensive line this year. Now, the SEC calls it. Let's be real. They're calling holding at a high rate. Some of those calls are questionable. Gunnar Helms, that was BS, but that was an offensive line, to your point. But I do think that change in the run game has been a factor.
Yep, and obviously CJ Baxter not coming back. So as Rod says all the time, it's not what you want to be, it's what you have to be. You got to fix the problem. And if it's going to be Trey Wisner, CJ, they've got to build to that. And is there a chance here in this bye week, as Sark said on Monday, that they really want to focus on getting some young guys reps, get the veterans off their feet a little bit, get them fresh, but really evaluate the young guys? Does that mean Jarrett Gibson working on pass protection, trying to make sure, because right now it kind of feels like they don't trust him in those spots, especially against these better SEC defenses. But boy, that's a guy that could bring some power between the tackles kind of run game if you can get him up to speed and the pass protection. We're now 2 months into the year.
Yeah, I don't know if it's pass protection that's really holding them back, because what are the other two that are doing right now that's setting them apart? I would say not much. There's been miscommunications with the running backs in all sorts of pass protections right now. So if that's what's holding them back, we'll see what this week can do for them in that regard. I think, again, it's just earning that trust. When you're on the field, are you taking care of the football? Are you in the right spots? If Quinn needs you to check down and you're in the right spot, can you catch the football? Can you make a play after the catch? We've not really seen Jarrett Gibson, when he was on the field earlier this year, be a weapon in the passing game. And that's kind of what we've expected so far with Trey Wisner and Jaden Blue. Each of them get about 6 or 7 targets per game. And that's a big focal point of what they're expected to do. Is there enough of that with Jarrett Gibson right now? It's probably worth, kind of monitoring moving forward, especially into the bye week. But again, I think he would add up a nice little change up for this running game. He's a downhill, powerful guy that can play within the tackles. And to Jerry's point that he made earlier, I mean, he's not a guy that's going to continually bounce things outside when guys expect it to go in. They're not in a holding position trying to set the edge for a play that goes inside. So that would kind of fit what CJ Baxter has done in the past of just find the ball and go get downhill. It'll be interesting. I'd like to see what Jarrett Gibson could do at some point, but if I didn't see him against Vanderbilt, why would I expect him to see time against Florida, or Arkansas? I don't know.
What'll be interesting, guys, is Florida can't stop the run. And Texas, that's not their strength. And is something going to give in that game? Because that's what's going to be interesting to me is Florida's given up 182 yards a game on the ground, and that's one of the worst in the country, right? Especially for the major schools. So people have run the ball. A&M, Tennessee, people have run the ball on Florida this year. And that's, Jarrett Gibson was one-time Florida commitment from Gainesville. So we'll see, right? But that's what's going to be interesting kind of contrast in the Texas-Florida game is Florida's weakness defensively is they do not stop the run well. And is that going to change how Sark looks at that game and how he schemes that game? We'll find out, but I think that's going to be interesting to see how that game plays out for Texas offensively versus the Florida defense.
Good point.
All right, we'll pick up some more Longhorn improvement conversation, plus the recruiting news. Let me tell you about our friends at Carrot Concierge, because it's going to flip to November here this week, and that means you got to start thinking about Christmas gifts for your wife, your daughter, your parents, mother, of course, anniversary gifts as well. If you're looking for the right gift for the woman in your life, make sure you check out the Carrot Concierge. I got this fancy, great digital graphic here. Jody Reynolds, personal jeweler. She's the Carrot Concierge. With an office right here in Central Texas, right there in Westlake. She focuses on helping men purchase the special gift for the women in your life. So there's no intimidation. She's going to help you with it. So you can describe what your wife likes, and she'll walk you into what it needs to be. You can use that QR code right there on the screen. Just take a picture of it with your phone and learn even more about their Instagram account, the website, thecarrotconcierge.com. That's thecarrotconcierge.com. Jody prides herself in providing personal service. She takes extra steps to make sure your lady gets exactly what she wants, because she doesn't have the overhead of a storefront. There's no brick and mortar location. She runs it all, so she can save you a lot of money, as much as 30%, as a matter of fact, or less, 30% or more on what you'd see at the jewelry store. So if you're looking for something special with some help from her, which she'll help, that's why she's the concierge. It's right there at the thecarrotconcierge.com. Just a variety of bracelets, rings, necklaces, and more, all beautiful jewelry, personalized for you and yours. Check out the Carrot Concierge website. Visit the website or call or text that special someone in your life. I've got a wife and a daughter and a mom, a sister. I might be going all in with Jody, because that's a great idea and something for everybody. Get that Christmas shopping out of the way, and you have your own personal shopper, the Carrot Concierge, to make that happen. That's a great way to go with Jody and her team at the Carrot Concierge. All right, guys. So running game, that's interesting. I love how you put that, Jerry, that Florida's given up almost 200 yards a game on the ground. Texas should, coming out of the bye week, be able to establish that. You said, CJ, the offensive line, your biggest focus. Jerry, what are you seeing from the offensive line as someone who focuses on that position? What have been the issues in both protection in your mind and in the run game? I know we talk about holding calls, but what else are we seeing from that O-line that, it's all the returning guys plus Cam Williams? Where are the issues that you're seeing?
Yeah, so CJ will have the breakdowns, I'm sure, but the delayed linebacker blitzes and the A-gaps have been an issue the last couple of games. And I don't have the breakdown on percentage of that, but that's from watching the games, doing the watch with us. We watch some of the games. Those have been delayed linebacker blitzes have given this line a little bit of an issue. And everybody's going to copy it. Now, everybody doesn't have Georgia's personnel, especially at linebacker, but you saw Vanderbilt. That first batted ball interception was delayed linebacker blitz. So that's what's going to be interesting to me is how many teams can kind of duplicate that, and what does Texas need to do to help get that area fixed a little bit. And we'll see if they can. Obviously, Cam Williams at times, he's got to be better in pass pro, I think, and just him individually, first-year starter, I think he can improve there. But I look, I don't think all the sacks against Georgia weren't on the offensive line at the same time. I mean, Quinn has got I jokingly said I'd have Quinn jump roping every time he's not on the field. I jokingly say chasing chickens like Rocky did in the streets of Philadelphia, right? I mean, he is, for whatever reason, he just wasn't born with that reactive body quickness under duress, like when the walls are quickly closing. And now, when they're not quickly closing in, he's fine. He moves around fine. But when it's a more athletic, fast close in around him, he doesn't react like some other quarterbacks do. And some guys are different. They have different strengths and weaknesses, right? And he's going to have to go on and maximize that for his career in football. He's going to have to work on that aspect of it just to maximize the reactive and body quickness. So I don't think all the sacks are on the offensive line. I'll say that. I think running back pass pro's got to be better. The recognition. I think obviously tight end, it's given up a couple as well. So I don't think it's one thing, but if there's one thing I've noticed from the last two games, the delayed linebacker blitzes and the A gaps are giving Texas some issue.
Yeah, you can point about that anywhere on the defense, right? It was the nickel blitz that got Texas twice this past weekend. One of them was obviously resulted in an interception. The other one, a play in which Quinn held it on a RPO. No one was open. They covered it well, but he got sacked as a result. 3 guys actually came in and got him. To me, and it's the fixable, it's the correctable, it's what you should be diagnosing before the snap. Against Georgia, it was a split of Cam Williams and DJ Campbell that flushed Arch out for about a 7-8 yard loss on a sack, right? Against Georgia, against Vanderbilt, it was in the run game. It was Gunnar Helm and Kelvin Banks having a guy split right between the two, getting Jaden Blue for a loss of 3 that backs Texas up. Texas only had 1 snap ahead of the chains in the second half in those final 5 possessions where they were ahead of the chains. And that was on a 3rd and 1. And guess what happened right after that? Holding call, sack, punt by 4th and 17. So if you can't stay ahead of the chains against these next 4 teams, you're going to have a tough time doing anything. And that starts with the offensive line to me. And it starts with the pre-snap diagnosis of what's supposed to be blocked, who's supposed to be blocking them, and where the next guy's supposed to be chipped in and helping. Because again, the first interception, the batted ball at the line of scrimmage, Drake Majors doubles on his guy, a little dual RPO, comes off, doesn't get enough of a chip on the blitzing linebacker in the A gap, to your point, Jerry. And instead of getting enough on him, a shoulder would have done just enough. Blocked him right off the line. He gets through, gets a hand up, bats the ball, interception. And that's something that you expect this offensive line to have the awareness to block, have the understanding to block, and get the quickness out there to double and quickly diagnose what's left instead of getting some tunnel vision, which I think at times happens with this offensive line. That's got to be better. And of course, to your point, Quinn has to be better as well.
Yeah. I love it. Great stuff, guys. Also on the jump roping that you mentioned during the watch along, Jerry, and you mentioned boxers, and that's what boxers do, right? I mean, Russell Wilson, you talked about doing the boxing drills to improve his footwork. I mean, that's something Quinn might consider with his camp. Like he may want to work on it. Huh?
He's going to have to long term.
Yeah.
Because what we said at the Georgia game for his long term is Georgia is every week in the NFL.
Yeah, that's 100%. And I wanted to ask you all that too, because I think you hear it and you hear it and you hear it, but the SEC provides a different level of athlete week to week than you've been used to. And does some of that come into play here with 4 games played now in the SEC or 5? And, even the Mississippi State game, it took you a minute to get caught up. And even Vanderbilt's bringing really good athletes. That's this conference. It's the NFL light for a reason.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's why I think this off week is coming at the perfect time for Texas to get some of these correctable issues, fixed the best they can, because the reality is, I mean, Florida, I'm not sure their front 7, they don't have, look, if you were ranking them on the Texas schedule, I don't even think Georgia, A&M, Michigan, Oklahoma, all of those are definitely higher as far as fronts go, defensive fronts go. So Florida's not there at that level. Florida's got good players. I mean, one guy's 450 pounds. So, he doesn't really factor into what we're talking about here. So they're okay. They have good athletes, better athletes than Vanderbilt, but they're not elite up front. Now Kentucky's got one guy who can be a destructive force, right? And they're good up the middle. But then you get down to Arkansas has got enough disruption, but everybody's got disruption coming up the next 3 games. Then A&M's a little different because they got, look, they went all in on defensive line recruiting under Jimbo, and they still have a lot of those guys. Then they had a first rounder out of the portal. So they got like 5 future NFL draft picks on their front 4. I mean, that means somebody's not even starting, maybe 6. DJ Hicks will end up being one. So that literally everybody that plays a big role for them is a future draft pick. But it's going to test Texas, and I think it comes at the right time. The biggest thing for me too, CJ and Aaron, is it's outside of the correctable issues like in pass protection. It's just the bad timing, the late hit on Cam Williams. Even though Texas got a first down, it slowed momentum in that drive. It's the holds in the kick return game, right? I mean, they have to correct those things, and that's more goes to get discipline within the game over a try hard hold in the run game against a really good athlete. That's going to happen sometimes in a conference with really good players. So the correctable unforced errors. Sometimes a really good defensive team or player is going to force you into an error, and you can live with that as a coach. It's the unforced errors that get under your skin and stay under your skin and piss you off. Those are the things that Texas really needs to correct and play at a higher level, is the unforced errors coming down the stretch.
Hey, Jerry, and Aaron, can I ask both of you, what's the strength of this Texas offense right now? After the last 3 weeks, is there one?
Well, wide receivers, tremendous.
Now, is that enough? If you're just basing it off the wide receiver play and what you hope Quinn can do to get them the rock, is that enough to win out?
And I would say just to that, Jerry, before you answer, just pass catchers. I mean, I think if you combine receivers with tight ends with even the running backs out of the backfield, that's the strength of the team in the quick passing game. Eventually, hopefully, the long passing game. But that is the strength. But your question is very fair, CJ.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, that's why the receivers are going to win. And the receivers are going to win versus everybody on Texas' schedule. What you ran into with Georgia, who nobody can replicate that front 7. Jalen Walker's a stud. He was the best player on the field that night. And we talked about going into the game when Georgia puts him on the edge, he's as good a pass rusher as in the country, but they play him inside backer a lot. But in Georgia's deal, I think the only team like that. If Texas gives Quinn and Sark time for the plays to develop, Texas is going to win every single game at wide receiver and tight end. And so the key comes down to, guys, is giving Quinn and Sark enough time and having enough running game to hold some of that pass rush. But if Texas can figure that out a little bit, play at a little higher, cleaner level there, who's guarded Texas wides this year?
Yeah.
I mean, they're expecting speed so much. Everybody's playing 2 high shell, 3 high, playing off coverage. I mean, it's been the same all season. So all these coaches aren't wrong. They're all seeing it. Dude, Texas is really, really good, really fast, really good, big. With this Wingo kid, they're fast. Everybody can make a play when they're out there. Multiple guys are fast. So how do you combat that if you're playing against Texas?
Yeah, and of course, that's why it was a little encouraging to me. And I'm nitpicking here, but 2 of the better throws from Quinn against Vanderbilt came in that second half. And I know that he was very short in that first half, and he was completing. And to me, if you're completing and you're gaining yards and you're putting points on the board, who cares where the throws go? But 2 of the better throws for Quinn in that game against Vanderbilt were in the second half. The 3rd and 20 conversion to Silas Bolden, where he climbed the pocket. Hayden Connor actually helped out very well in pass protection to knock that nose tackle off on the ground to the right side. Quinn climbed the pocket, found a 25-yard completion to Silas Bolden, and then about 4 or 5 snaps after that, he found Ryan Wingo on a 2nd and 19 for a 10 or 12-yard gain. Another one where he climbed the pocket. We just haven't seen that. And so if he can get back to that, and he said in the postgame, that was the healthiest he's felt since the Michigan game before the injury. So if that's something that can get him back in the confidence of climbing, throwing off rhythm, looking down the field, that's huge, because that's not been the case over the last 2.5, 3 games.
So somebody asked in the chat earlier about Isaiah Bond, and I think somebody asked about Makuba. Both are expected back for Florida.
100%. And to the point of the short passing game, CJ, I loved your question of Sark on Monday. But yeah, they are playing 2 high and 3 high shells against this team. You also can combat that with running the ball a little bit. That goes back to the initial point. Start running the ball a little bit, and then all of a sudden they do have to come up a little, and you can go over the top of them. Speaking of the speed and the receivers, is there any update? I heard Sark kind of vague and ambiguous on Monday about Jonte Cook? I mean, is this a doghouse situation? Is that where we're at? I was told by one person maybe he was late for a meeting at some point. I don't know. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like he's seeing a lot of playing time right now.
No.
Circle of trust is shrunk by one, CJ. Fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of been the case this year again. You know, if you've got an Isaiah Bond, if you've got a Matthew Golden, if you've got a DeAndre Moore, guys that can do big things in other aspects of the game, you better be able to have something that you can bring with you to get those guys off the field, right? And so that's again kind of where I'm at right now. To get on the field, you have to bring something that other guys cannot. And I don't know if that's the case with some of these younger cats that aren't seeing the field.
Perfectly said. Let me talk about Hargrove Roofing, a great partner of ours on the On Texas Football Channel and this Tuesday live stream. They have offices all over Louisiana, Arkansas, and, of course, the great state. They're going to take care of all of your roofing needs. You see all the information you need right there. Jot it down, hargroveroofing.com, 645-3202. Plus, they're super Longhorn friendly. Their partners include Bert Auburn, Stevie Lee, who you see on the On Texas channel quite a lot. Stevie does a great job analyzing the Longhorns, but he also is all about Hargrove Roofing and talking Texas football. Call them today for a free roof inspection. I know through the summer we had a bunch of hailstorms and storm. Haven't seen much of that lately, but that damage is there. Make sure you get it checked out. That's a free inspection. With Hargrove Roofing, the rainy season will come back around, and want to make sure that roof is protected. Hargrove Roofing, know who's on your roof. HargroveRoofing.com, 645-3202.
I want to say this. We did an event with Hargrove Roofing a couple of weeks ago. All very personable, a lot of fun. I mean, call Hargrove Roofing for all your roofing needs. They're great guys. Yep. Had a lot of fun with those guys. Just we had a blast, man. So it's one thing to have a great company. It's another thing to meet a company. Aaron, I know you've been doing this for years, so you know what I'm talking about. When you meet the people who own the company and run the company, you say, man, I just like to hang out with those guys too. I mean, it's genuine where they come from. They're very genuine. I couldn't have been more impressed meeting Billy and his team.
Yeah, well said, because, I mean, it's in what I do on the radio and what you guys do. I mean, you don't want to send people and they don't get the service they deserve, right? That breaks that circle of trust. They're trusting us that we're sending you to good people that are going to take care of you, customer service across the board. That's a very, very important component of that. And yes, I mean, you want to trust people that are, roofs can be expensive. There's no question about that. And repairs, you want to know you got somebody doing it right. So it's a great endorsement. All right, Jerry, the recruiting side of it. I know you've seen some of the Longhorn recruits here, and give me your thoughts, Jerry, as you too, CJ, on what this Thursday, Friday will look like for the Texas coaching staff and what you've seen the last few days, Jerry.
Yeah, so I watched Myron Charles today. There's a thread on ontexasfootball.com with multiple videos working on the sled, photos. I did tweet out a photo with his helmet, which was I thought was really cool. I don't know if producer Matt can pull that up from a tweet I heard earlier today while at Myron Charles practice. But he is up to about 300, 305 right now. Looks tremendous. He had his best game of the season against Naples per the coaching staff. And Naples is a really tough team to play against. They're kind of veer team, really tough. You got to take away the dive. Here's some of Myron today. Well, here's the way I'll describe him. If I was building a defensive lineman, this is how you build him. The guy's 6'4" and change. He's 300, 305, 310 pounds. He's got an 80-inch wingspan. He's got 10.5-inch hands. He's quick. He's powerful. Oh, and he's got skinny ankles. That's how you draw guys up right there. I mean, a big 6'4", 305, 310-pound guy who'll probably play about 315, 320 with an 80, 81-inch wingspan, 10.5-inch hands, and skinny ankles. Those are the guys we always look for in this business. And Texas happens to have two of them in Myron Charles and Josiah Sharma committed. And I think there's Myron's helmet. So he is locked in on Texas. I mean, look, everybody's still coming after him. The Florida schools, Miami was trying to get him down last week. A&M, LSU, everybody's still calling him. I think he's an underrated player nationally as far as rankings go. Senior tape's really good. I think he's a top 75 level player in the country for me doing this a long time, just based on the years doing this. He's very impressive. The other thing is, it was kind of funny today. We were talking about Javion Hilson, who he's got to be really good friends with throughout the process. And Javion Hilson, I think, is going to come down to it's crazy. A kid from Cocoa that plays edge is going to come down to a Texas and Texas A&M decision. He was at Texas for the Georgia game. He was at A&M last weekend, and it was kind of funny. He was like, "Hey, man, I hope we play together. But if not, I guess I'll just have to whip his ass." So I was like, it was kind of funny to hear him say that. All those guys are buddies, but he was very impressive. Myron was, and I'll get to Javion Hilson after this. But Diabell interviews up with him on here on Texas Football. The American Heritage staff, they have had a lot of NFL players come through. Now, they hadn't had an NFL quarterback come through, but they have had Brian Burns. I mean, Pat Surtain Jr., Tyson Campbell. I mean, I can keep going. And Nick Ebanks, Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Herbert. I mean, they have one or two NFL, T. Darrell Slayton, on every team almost every year at American Heritage. And this staff has seen them all. And they just couldn't have been more complimentary and impressed with the strides Dia made as a really good sophomore to junior year. The plays he's making with his feet, the leadership he's shown, because they played arguably his toughest schedules of anybody in high school football. He plays under duress every week, even though he's on a talented team. And the plays he's made, the leadership he showed with some tough, close losses, the ability to make plays with the arm and feet in tough situations and big situations. They beat St. Thomas Aquinas last Friday. So saw him yesterday, and we'll be seeing a couple other guys the rest of the week out here in Florida. I saw Hilson last week. We'll talk about later on.
That playing under duress, you got to like that. You got to love that as a quarterback, right?
Yeah. Well, it's going to happen.
Whatever,
as you climb levels, it's going to happen more often. Quinn Ewers learning that right now. I've always been taught about my scouting buddies, Jerry, about the high butt when you're scouting. But what are the skinny ankles is quick feet? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, big guys with skinny ankles. I mean, skinny ankle guys are just really good athletes. They're really twitchy guys for me. They always have been. I mean, look, it's not a comparison, but the smallest ankles I've ever seen in my life were TJ Ford's. Okay, I mean, when you see a guy who's 6'4", 310, 305, Laramie Tunzel was that way in high school, and they have skinny ankles, those dudes are really good athletes. I mean, you'd have to bring in Todd Wright from a genetics perspective, but all I can tell you is in my time doing this as a profession and growing up around it, my dad was a coach, those dudes, those big dudes that also have skinny ankles, they're some of the best athletes you'll see.
Yeah,
period.
twitchy, yeah.
Twitchy guys.
Moving that big body quickly. CJ, what do you hear, and what do you think the plan will be for this coaching staff into the weekend while the players enjoy a weekend off?
Yeah, it'll be very much like what we saw earlier this season with the bye week earlier in the year. Sarkisian mentioned Monday. They'll be back on the road, and they'll be seeing 25s, trying to fill out this 2025 cycle. Of course, sitting with 21 commits in the class, you're going to expect that number to be around 26 to 28. How it fills out, where it fills out, we got a pretty good idea, obviously, with who's still on the board, but it's going to be up to the staff to go close the deal. And as Jerry mentioned, guys are getting recruited from everywhere, right? Javion Hilson. If that comes down to Texas A&M, you expect a Texas coach at some point to stop back down by Florida and go see him. They'll also start to get a head start on some top 26s, right? Because this timeline that we're seeing over the last 2 to 3 cycles has sped up just a little bit. Signing day is now the first week of December, which means you get that class locked up, you're moving on to seeing some 26s. Of course, Texas has 3 in their 26 class, one of which might reclassify later this year to 2025. We're seeing a lot of quarterbacks already commit off the board. Texas has theirs, but now once you get your quarterback, you can start to fill in with the rest of your class. And if you have momentum on the football field, you have a great opportunity to take advantage and really start knocking things out with the class next up. We saw that this past weekend with Texas A&M snagging 3 commitments after that win against LSU. If that's what Texas wants to do, they have the opportunity. But this weekend's going to be a big one to get out there and really start getting an extra face-to-face with some of these big-time recruits.
It's the first off week. Sark spent that Friday on the road in Houston. So you expect it to be Dallas and out of state this go around. And I think the staff will be dispersed around the state of Texas and around the country. It'll be interesting to see where Sark goes, maybe where Kyle Flood goes. So it's going to be interesting to see at the end of the week here.
All right, guys. Jerry, tell them about Duck Camp, and then we're going to talk, answer some super chats, maybe talk a little basketball, because before we do this Tuesday live stream again next week, we will have a Texas basketball game in play. They're going to play next Monday in Las Vegas against Ohio State. So I want to talk some Texas hoops real quick. But tell them about the Duck Camp.
Yeah, Duck Camp is made for the people that live in the moments out there where there are fish to catch. Our friend UT Boy, big fisher there, guy. Birds to hunt, time to kill, football to watch. They like doing all that stuff. So they built the company centered on it, based in Austin, and dedicated to giving people best in class hunting and fishing apparel. There are those of you out there that look forward to opening day of hunting season and the kickoff of every single Texas Longhorns football game with the fervor and excitement of a 5-year-old on Christmas morning. And Duck Camp is here to let you know that from fishing, from opening day to game day, they've got you covered. At Duck Camp, they believe you can't just sit around and wait for the adventure to come to you. You have to get out there, stay out there, and make the most of every single second. Here's the great season, y'all. Yes, hunting and football. Shop hunting gear at duckcamp.com.
Great stuff. Yeah, man, that's good gear. And, hunting season coming quick. And we've got a lot of seasons. Got election season. There'll be an election next week. There'll be, the college football playoff rankings will come out next Tuesday. We're going to have trade deadline in the NFL if you're paying attention to that. A lot happening. But Texas basketball is going to fire up, Jerry, and the CJ. Longhorn Hoops, Rodney Terry and company with another rebuilt roster, but it seems like a pretty talented one. Next Monday night, they're going to play out at the T-Mobile Center there in Vegas and play Ohio State on the 4th. I'm sure a lot of Longhorn fans who are watching are going to head out there during the bye week, enjoy Vegas, and maybe take in Longhorn basketball right there near the Cosmo Hotel. What do we make of this roster? Very athletic, offensively really good. What are the strengths we see so far? We're going to learn it as we go.
Yeah, I watched them practice a couple of weeks ago before the Mississippi State game. And look, it's a much, much better roster, much more talented roster than last year. They beat TCU, beat up on TCU 80-52 in a scrimmage 2 weeks ago. Now, this isn't the TCU that's 5 or 6 seed in the NCAA tournament, but Jamie Dixon's a really good coach, and they're still a quality program. But Texas absolutely handled them. And in that game, Tremont Mark and Trey Johnson led in scoring with 13. It was a really balanced day. Jason Kent hit 3 threes. Caden Shedrick hit 2 threes. They shot the ball as a team really well that day. Trey Johnson was 0 for 4 from 3, which you won't see much this season. But around him, they shot the ball really well. It's a team that I think is going to shoot upwards of 38%, probably 37% as a team from 3. If the right 6 guys are taking the majority of those shots, I think it's going to be the best free throw shooting team Texas has had in my years covering Texas. Then they scrimmage Colorado Sunday. Now, Tremont Mark did not play, and Tremont Mark, the transfer from Houston, then Arkansas, 6'5" and change, lefty guard. Well, maybe an NBA two-way contract level player. We'll see if that's what ends up. I think that's what some NBA scouts are thinking right now. But he may be the best college player on this team. Trey Johnson's the potential lottery pick. Trey Johnson is a player Texas has never had in my years doing this, a 6'6" shooting guard that's as talented as Trey Johnson. He can absolutely score. He's got great feel. He is tough. He is a willing leader on an older team. I saw it with my own eyes. I wouldn't have believed it if somebody said what I saw. It was wild how vocal he was with a bunch of 22-year-olds. I thought it was kind of refreshing because I saw TJ Ford do that, and I'm not comparing him as players. But Trey had 31 in the win over Colorado Sunday in the scrimmage, closed-door scrimmages, guys. Texas, I think that was 79-75. They were up as much as 17. They were up 12 minutes at the 4 and under timeout. They fouled on a three-pointer that made it a little closer. Then they kind of changed some rotations late, some players late in that game, so it ended up being like 4. But again, Tremont Mark didn't even play in that game. Big guards on this team. Trey Johnson, 6'6", Mark, 6'5" and a quarter. Even Malik Presley off the bench is a 6'5" wing, 6'6". Devin Pryor in year 2, a 6'7" wing. So they have more switchability on the perimeter. They have more length on the perimeter. It's going to be a tougher. If they bring this thing together, the key for me, and there's a lot to talk about. We'll do some preview shows. By the way, Rodney Terry is scheduled to be on the channel here later this week, so we'll have an interview with RT. But the whole key for me is they have 8 starter-level players, and that is Jordan Pope and Julian Larry, who are the point guards, and Pope's more of a combo guard who can really shoot it. Trey Johnson, Tremont Mark, Kendall Weaver, Arthur Kaluma, Jason Kent, and Caden Shedder. Those 8 guys are starter-level players. They're going to play starter-level minutes most games. Then you have Malik Presley. You have Devin Pryor. And then you have a freshman, Jamie Vinson, who maybe not ready now, but he's really come on the last 3 weeks of practice. And he maybe gives you something later in the year if you need it. Zurika Nyemba is the backup center I think he's kind of the ninth guy right now, ninth guy or 10th guy backing up Shedrick. And he can play his role. I think Vincent's a more skilled guy, but I'm not sure he's physically ready, although he's made plays in practice of late and really shown some ability to challenge shots at the rim. But this team has a chance to be really good. Now, you could be 6th or 7th the SEC and be a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, by the way, and be ranked top 17 in the country. But the key is going to be, does everybody buy into their roles? 8 starter level players, 5 guys start. Obviously, Kendall Weaver's like Sir-Jabari Rice. He's fine coming off the bench. Doesn't matter. Then how do those guys buy in usually starters that aren't starters now? Everybody buy in. Do they buy into those roles? Do they buy into the total team? Are guys willing to defer the ball to a freshman late in the last 4 minutes of some key games? Because Trey Johnson is a tremendous freshman scorer of the basketball, and he can also make plays. So all that stuff's got to come together before the game within the game happens. But if that stuff comes together, Texas is a much more talented team. They have multiple guys who can go get their own shot. Like last year when you doubled Smith, you would just hard hedge, push him out to 28 feet, and the ball is reversed to Tyrese Hunter. You never knew what you were going to get.
Right.
If you hard hedge anybody on this team and the ball's reversed to Tremont Mark or Trey Johnson, you got playmakers. It's a totally different team this year. And a guy like Jason Kent's a tremendous player without the basketball, And that most improved player may be Caden Shedrick because he's healthy. He's going to have to stay out of foul trouble. His fouls per minute average needs to come down, but he's healthy. He's stronger. He's healthier. He's a more confident guy, challenging the rim defensively and taking on contact. So we'll see how it all works out. But Texas fans are going to see a much more talented team. With that being said, they start the season against Ohio State. It's an NCAA tournament level game. Both teams are in bracketology. Both teams expected to make the tournament. So this isn't Houston Christian out of the gate. This is an NCAA tournament level game.
Yeah, Jerry, I wanted to ask you, is there enough rim protection on this team? I know that's been an issue when Dessou went down last year and you didn't have him due to foul trouble or whatnot. Could you trust who was on the floor to defend the rim and be physical there? Is that something that length on the perimeter is going to help?
Yeah, I think they're going to be okay there. The key for me is like a guy like Kaluma. He can average 8-9 rebounds a game, and he can be a defensive switch guy on the perimeter. He's got to buy into that role. Look, I'm one that believes in college basketball. Everybody wants to be UConn and have those teams. It's not realistic. Can you be Miami? Can you be FAU? That's the key here. Everybody wants to have these perfect rosters, but let me know when Texas has ever been a blue blood with a perfect roster in college basketball. We've never seen it. So you have to do it a little different at Texas. And I think they're going to be, I think now there's going to be some teams that'll give them issues, right? But there's some teams that won't have the guards to play with Texas this year either, that may have better bigs, may have more depth at bigs than Texas. But ideally, Texas would be close to the Miami team that beat Texas. In an ideal world, they'd be close to that with a little bit better rebounding overall, because Miami had North Shadow Mirror, but they didn't have anything behind it. And they went to the Final Four because they were unbelievable at guard and could break you down one-on-one. You couldn't do anything with them in the half court. But I think Texas is going to be, if they maximize this team, are going to be similar to that Miami team with a little bit more depth at power forward.
Interesting. Yeah, Miami, that was a really good team for Jim Larinaga. And 2 point guards with Julian Larry from Indiana State, Jordan Pope from Oregon State, Jason Kent from Indiana State as well. So a lot of veteran players, and then a phenom like Trey Johnson. Be fun to watch this team. And you mentioned Caden Shedrick. I think that's to his point about the height. I mean, he's your tallest player. Came in from Virginia last year, and we always saw him with the shoulder harnesses that he was wearing. You say that he looks bigger, but more healthy, and his shoulders aren't popping out all the time. That's huge.
Yeah, he looks stronger. I mean, he's attacking the rim better. He's a more confident player on both ends of the floor. Now, his key offensively is just be a little bit more decisive on the catch in the post. Sometimes I think he waits a little bit. He's got to be decisive. The more decisive he will be in the post, going to a right-handed jump hook over left shoulder, right? The more decisive he is on the catch, I think that's going to help the perimeter players on this Texas team, because he's going to get some favorable spots. But to your point, defensively, I think it's the confidence, it's the strength. He's a healthier player now. Last year, he was never fully healthy. So it's amazing what that does. But I think the other thing with this Texas team, it'll be interesting to see. They can play 4 guards in a big effectively. You didn't have that option last year. They could play really small and go with a Kaluma as a 5 and go faster if they want. But you got to be able to rebound and defend to play fast. So, or they could go bigger a little bit, at times too. So they have more versatility. It's going to be a better team to coach because you have more versatility. But keeping Shedrick out of foul trouble in some games, you're Alabama, who's supremely talented. You're Auburn, who's just going to relentlessly attack your butt in the paint, at the rim, at the square. There's going to be some of those games where his fouls per minute have to come down. But that's how many teams actually can do that is the question. Rick Barnes will try to physical you off the floor in SEC play. Chris Beard will try to physically you off the floor in Oxford later in SEC. Florida's got some size. They got a lot of size. I think that guy's a really good young coach. But I think Texas is going to be okay because their guards are really good. They can shoot it. They're going to make free throws. They have a lot of experience on this team. The whole key is, does this thing come together? If it comes together, Texas is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I remember Chris Beard saying that when he was first here at Texas and had a brand new roster and said it's about time. How much time do we have to get the chemistry built with a talented group? And that team ended up being pretty darn good that year. And then the following year almost made the Final Four with Rodney Terry. All right, let me tell you about our friend Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders, the only insurance agent you're going to need. It's 35 years of experience you're talking about with Texas alum and Longhorn super fan Mark Saunders. When it comes to protecting all of your stuff, it's great to have it all protected in one place, and that's what Mark Saunders does, whether it's your home, your car, boats, motorcycles, RVs, ATVs, any of your toys or stuff. If you're looking for someone local to the Austin Round Rock area, that is Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders, 512-218-8571. That's 512-218-8571. So ask yourself again as you put your head on the pillow tonight and drift off to sleep, are you in good hands? Is everything covered? It will be with our friend Mark Saunders and his 35 years of experience here in Central Texas. 218-8571. Online there as well with the great agency at Allstate here in Williamson County, Travis County, the best. And we really appreciate him every single Tuesday for making this happen for us. All right, guys.
I got a question. Can I ask CJ a question real quick?
Got it.
What's the line? Florida, Texas, the line's already out in at 17.5. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I am. Very, very much so. Again, Florida, for all their faults, for all their question marks this year, and you can talk about talent on the field. They got guys. That's a very explosive offense. At least it can be, and it has proven to be under DJ Lagway. Texas hasn't necessarily allowed explosive plays, which is going to be key for that game. If Texas makes if they make Florida and they make Lagway go first down by first down by first down down the field, Texas will be fine. But you've seen in every game that he's been a part of, you've seen 45, 50-yard touchdowns down the field. That's something I think Florida's been very good at this year, is just hucking the ball deep and having a guy run underneath it and catch it for a touchdown. That feels like a recipe for them to come into games and at least find a way to put easy points on the board very quickly. Defensively on the other side, like you said, this is going to be a great opportunity for Texas to get its run game back, play complementary football, and just find ways to get back to what that offense was earlier in the year.
Yeah, well said. And again, the number one defense in the country belongs to the Texas Longhorns. What you guys both think about, I think we're both going to be thumbs up, but Jelani McDonald's performance against Vanderbilt coming in with the injuries at safety, I thought 25 was outstanding.
Yeah, I thought it was physical, played with a lot of confidence.
Quick.
Quick. The interesting thing to me is, we saw it coming in the Michigan game, CJ, because they played him so much at nickel. And you can only do that if a guy is really starting to lock in to a position. Because in high school, he's a jack of all trades. So last year was a learning year for him. Really, the Texas staff figuring out we love this guy, but what is he? What can he be? Where's the best place to play him at? But then when you saw him starting to play nickel, you're like, they can only do that if he's picking up things. And that was a really good sign for a guy who's got great size and he's physical. And he'll still continue to get better in coverage as he goes along as a safety. But I really like what I saw. And now, because I was worried And Aaron, I was worried when Derek Williams went down. Derek was the best alley cat, as Rod calls it, the best run defender at the safety position consistently, coming downhill. That's what concerned me. But if Jelani McDonald fills that like he did against Vanderbilt, Texas is okay. Because then you get Makuba back, and you have a really solid three-man of safeties, and you have Jordan Johnson-Rubel as your fourth. So I thought Jelani was tremendous Saturday.
Yeah, all three of those Waco Conley kids were really good. Yes. You know, and Trey Wisner, I know he moved up to DeSoto, but that was a kid that lived in Waco for most of his high school days as well. So for him, Kobe Black in 9 plays to have really a pick 6, 2 PBUs, one of which in the end zone. They tried him, and he certainly showed up. So good day for the Waco Conley kids, no doubt.
And speaking of those safeties, I read the comment from Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt that he thought Michael Taft, you know, he said his intelligence jumps off the field. He said he was everywhere. Whenever I was looking to make a play, there was 16 right where I wanted to throw the football. And you know, that's Michael Taft, man. That guy just shows up and shows out and played a heck of a ball game. Really quick, congratulations to Jade Barron. He was named the midseason. What award I saw him get? He was a midseason finalist for the Thorpe Award today. So good for Jade. He had a great game, of course. Even in the Georgia game, he had 2 interceptions. But Texas lost, all the Pats break up. So good to see Jade getting that national recognition today. Some super chats, Matthew. Let's crank them out and get some good questions in there. Jerry needs a luxury on Texas football RV for his recruiting travels. We started a GoFundMe page. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, man. How about that, man? You need a traveling entourage. I like that.
I would love that. Let's CC Bobby Burton on that.
Can we get 2023 DFW class update? A lot of rumors going around here in Dallas that some of them will transfer this upcoming portal window. Shake my head.
We're at that point in the season where if some guys aren't getting as many snaps as expected or wanted, that the rumors are going to fire up. One thing Texas has been really strong at, and CJ can speak to the same thing, and Aaron, is player retention. If they want to retain guys, their player retention's been pretty solid. So we'll see after the season who they want to retain.
Well, and we mentioned Jonte Cook earlier. That would be a name that would be mentioned. But, you know, I was asked about that this week. I was like, well, you know, a lot of these guys are going to move on. Isaiah Bond's going to go to the NFL. I mean, Silas Bolden's out of time here. Matthew Golden. I mean, there's going to be spots that you're playing with Arch Manning most likely next year. Do you really is the grass greener? I don't know, but obviously, if you're not in the circle of trust, there's going to be some of those conversations for sure, and that's just the big picture conversation.
Because the reality is, if you couldn't crack the rotation this year, I mean, Wingo's a year older. DeAndre Moore is not coming off the field. I think Matthew Golden will go pro because I just think he's a really good player. Obviously, Bond's gone, but you know, Wingo, DeAndre Moore, that's 2 spots. And you got 2 really good freshmen committed and 3 receivers coming in. You know there's going to be somebody out of the portal. So it's tough. You either have to have some real stick-to-itiveness and be development oriented here and with patience, or you think, okay, I need to go somewhere else and assured I get my targets looking forward to the future.
Yeah, and that's the player empowerment movement we've talked about so much. Here's Clay with a great super chat. Lifetime Longhorn fan from Kentucky. Going to get down to Austin. My first home game against UK. Recommendations for entertainment food to check out that weekend. Gosh, we could go on and on, right? where you're going to go.
You and CJ could go an hour on this one by itself.
Yeah, we will. Well, hey, Clay, be tuned in the Tuesday of the Kentucky game, and I'll put a list of things together. Okay, let's do that, because we got a few weeks to compile that. But I'll have a look at the entertainment calendar from the music side of things. And, you know, we don't want to lead you astray here 3 weeks out to that ball game, 4 weeks out. But we will do that the week of. Thank you, Clay, very, very much. But restaurants.
Gus's Fried Chicken. Hit it.
There it is. Yes.
What'd you say, CJ?
Gus's Fried Chicken on, what is it, 2nd and Red River or something like that down in downtown? Good spot.
Good spot. We'll work on that for Clay for the Tuesday of the Kentucky live stream. Anything else, Matthew, we need to work through? What kind of recruiting power shift could happen if Texas missed the playoffs? The Aggies make the playoffs. Interesting.
Yeah, well, look, I think it's going to be – I think Oklahoma's the one that's about to get hit hardest recruiting in Texas. one of our John Burrows sent a text to our group today. A&M and Texas, the last time they both had double-digit wins in the same season was, I believe, was it 75 or 79?
Yep, 75.
75, okay. A&M and Texas are going to battle it out, right? But Oklahoma's the one who's up against it in a scenario where A&M and Texas are both good at the same time, because that's been rare. And LSU is still a good team, right? So Oklahoma's the one that's going to, I think, get pushed out even more in the state of Texas, because they'd be facing something they never have. That's A&M and Texas both being good at the same time, or winning double-digit games and having momentum at the same time. Let's say that. So in that scenario, I don't know. We'll see. What's interesting is something CJ made a point of earlier. The staffs are a little different in recruiting. And Sark's plays the long game. He's not in a hurry to get the 2026 guys committed. A&M, I think, is the exact opposite, because they're off to a really good start under Elko. They've won a couple of big home games. Well, no matter what you think of Missouri, what you think of LSU, they're big home games when you have a lot of kids there and you have a really good home atmosphere, and now you're ranked 10. You got to capitalize on that in recruiting. And I do think this is one area where these staffs are going to be totally different in recruiting. Sark, I think, likes the long game. I think A&M is going to try to get guys in the boat in 2026 a lot faster. Now, that may mean you lose a couple of guys, but they're going to try to build that momentum quicker off the season they're having on the field under Elko, and where I think Sark is a little different in that. I think Sark he's going to have a few commitments early, but Texas could have 10 2026 commitments right now if they really wanted to. But that's just not the direction they're going to go. They're going to kind of sit back, use all their evaluation time, use those junior days, see how many guys they can get to campus. So it's a little different the way these guys are going to attack it in 26 and 27, I think.
Good stuff right there. And obviously Oklahoma could be thinking about a coaching change when the season's over too, which would be interesting. You just never know. I mean, they could be 5. They got Maine this week, though. I think Oklahoma's going to find a W this week. First time in a while. All right, gentlemen, that was great stuff. Jerry, thanks for jumping in. I know you're traveling and checking out Myron Charles and Dia Bell and more to come with your recruiting updates and profiles. CJ, you'll be all over it this week here on the On Texas channel. And, of course, getting you ready for a big bye weekend with a lot of good games. Sit back and watch the competition, but also the Longhorn coaches will be out on the recruiting trail. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it very much. Matthew, awesome. Good stuff, everybody. Thanks for all the super chats. Thanks to all the partners who made it happen. Mark Saunders and Carrot Concierge and Duck Camp and Hargrove Roofing tonight. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Tuesday.